Hello, and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. My guest this week is the marvellous David Mellor. He started in the banking sector and developed a whole bunch of activities through 25 years of experience in commercial and investment banking. And his consultancy activities embrace strategic planning and implementation, as well as mentoring existing and aspiring entrepreneurs. And that later bit is where I had the good fortune to come across him. He is the very model of the modern mentor, if that doesn't sound too Gilbert and Sullivan, that I wanted to be to others. So listen to where David started and you'll feel, as I did when I first met him, great values, straightforwardness and pragmatism pouring out of him. Enjoy this interview. I think it's a real treat and privilege for me to have done, and I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, I grew up in the Northwest in Chester, went to the King's School founded by Henry VIII, and then got a place at St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, to read modern languages. Once I graduated, I joined Midland Bank as a trainee, and I was with them for 14 years and did most jobs you can do in banking, retail, commercial, international, and did a 3-year posting in Brussels. And that took me through to 1990, when, for the only time in my life, I was approached by a headhunter who was keen for me to consider moving to Deutsche Bank to set up a new business for them as they looked to expand and move from being the biggest bank in Europe to being the biggest bank in the world.
And at this point, David, was your mindset, were you just thinking, my career, it's going to be in finance, that's where I'm going to end up?
Yeah, I hadn't thought beyond it. One of the big lessons I learned really early on in my time at Midland was the only person in charge of my career development was me. I wasn't going to get any help from the bank. And so I actually was quite successful in charting my course through banking in terms of picking up promotions and roles that I had an interest in. And it was only in the final job I had that things started to change. And this wasn't a lightning bolt moment. It kind of like it crept up on me over time. And I was in corporate venture capital, and we were investing in early stage technology businesses. All the ones I was involved with were in the States, and we'd invested in them because they were developing a product or a service that was of strategic value to the bank worldwide. So I wasn't really a deal doer. I had people who did that for me, but my job really started once the investment was made, and I was figuring out how can the bank deliver to these people worldwide and benefit from their product at the same time. And it brought me into contact with a part of Deutsche Bank, which I hadn't really worked with before. And I realized that I was surrounded by people who operated off a completely different code of conduct and kind of ethical behavior base than me. And I was getting more and more uncomfortable with this. So I decided in 2001 to engineer my own departure and set up on my own. So I could live out in the workplace, the principles and values that were important to me.
So that's really interesting then. So it was a kind of look at how somebody else or some other entity or business was leading itself and the values that meant and so on. So it was values that, I mean, a lot of people talk about values in their business, but it was a look at somebody else's values thinking, I don't really want that. So if I do something, I want to set it up with values that I am comfortable with.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a huge difference between, it's a bit like politics, I suppose. There was a huge difference between what they said in all their marketing material and how they acted. And there's a famous, I think it originated from Germany actually, but there's a saying which is, the fish stinks from the head, and that was pretty much the case. So I engineered my own departure, and in terms of what I was going to do, that almost got parked. I was setting up as a sole practitioner consultant. And the guy that was my boss at Deutsche, who was very sad to see me leave, said, would I consider doing consultancy work for him in this fund that had been set up to where all these investments were held? Could I do some consultancy work for him about building an investor relations model? Because they were going to do, at that time, 100%, and there were about 15 of these investments, were all 100% funded by Deutsche. But he'd been working to create what he called like a collaborative VC model. So there were other entities, banks and other institutions who were interested in investing in the fund and leaving this Deutsche Bank team to make the investments.
Was that something that he felt that a skill that this idea about you helping him on investor relations and the collaborative nature of it, was that something he felt he couldn't find in-house, given that you weren't there anymore?
Yeah, because I was the only relationship guy he had. All the rest were deal doers,
right?
One way or another, or analysts. And so I was the only one that understood the benefit of collaborating with people, listening to them, and making things happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. So this job was going to be all about making sure any of the institutions that invested in this new fund basically were going to get proactive communication and collaboration from me, rather than just being silence and then a spreadsheet produced every 6 months or something.
So, I mean, this is fascinating because this was at a time when a lot of the, what are now, thankfully, more commonplace notions of collaborative and idea of multiple stakeholders and good ethical values. There wasn't a lot of that around in the city at the time. So it was a bit of a pioneering sort of project.
Oh, it was like the Wild West, basically. And so I thought, well, and this was going to be a three-year contract, 3 days a week. I thought, oh, fantastic! That gives me I'll be well paid. It gives me a predictable baseline cash flow, and it gives me time to figure out what I want to do in my own business, because that's what I can use the other 2 days for, to do some research and planning, so that I'm ready to go when this contract comes to an end. So I was feeling all good about this, and then two things happened. Oh, and then the other thing was two of the companies in the portfolio that I was working with. One was based in sort of near Seattle, and the other one was based in New York. They both knew I was leaving because I was going to have to step off their board. And what I spent 6 months in kind of good leaver category, trying to help smooth the transition and find replacement board members for me, and so on and so forth. So the plan was I would leave in the September of 2001. Anyway, both of them said, could I do some work for them on a paid basis? Once I'd left, and the bank was okay with that. So I said, great. So I thought, fine, I've already got some stuff to fill the other 2 days.
Yeah.
So I wasn't starting, scratching around thinking what I'm going to do, which so many people, as you'll know, do. They haven't got that first client. So I thought, well, this is great. And then two things happened. I was on holiday in the States in August, and I got a phone call from the guy I was closest to in this fund, saying, thought you ought to know there's some funny stuff going on. And so be prepared for some, roller coaster rides when you get back. So I'm still about a month away from leaving. Anyway, I got back, and what happened, there were equivalent units to ours in New York and Singapore. And the guy in New York, who was relatively new into the bank, made a pitch to one of the chairman of the board of Deutsche to run the business worldwide. And he was successful. And the first thing he did was fire everybody in Singapore. And then the second thing he did was fire everybody in London.
Okay.
And so I got caught up in this because I hadn't still left. And they took my deal off the table, and I got another one. And also, this guy was taking responsibility for this fund that I was going to have the consultancy contract with. And so that fund was collapsed. So I had a consultancy contract with a non-existent company.
Right.
So I thought, oh, this isn't great. So that's the first thing that happened. And then the second thing was that one of the companies, basically, they wanted me to help their top client. And their top client, would you believe it, the founder of his business, who's the guy I was working with, he feigned a cancer condition and disappeared from New York back to South Africa, where he came from, and was never seen again.
Wow.
So that was a bad debt, and I hadn't even started because I'd already started in some work for them.
Right.
And then the other one, the one from Seattle, they were working on a project with Deutsche Bank, actually, in New York. And if that project went well, there was a whole range of the top banks in the States lined up to sign up for the product that they had. But Deutsche were doing like a pilot on it because we were the investor. And the project got completely cancelled because of 9/11.
Right.
And so those two pieces of work, the supplementary pieces of work, both vaporized literally in September. And the military coup happened at the start of September. So all of a sudden, I'm out on the street with a blank piece of paper.
Okay. So you're in this situation. Just before that, before you'd
Yeah,
gone off on holiday,
yeah,
you'd been thinking all's well with the world.
brilliant. Yeah,
This sort of, this work sort of with my own business or with my set of
yeah.
projects couldn't be easier. The work's just falling in, and then you come back from holiday, complete transformation,
Yeah.
combination.
I
Sort of
tell you,
strange.
Trevor, it was
Yeah,
it
go
was
on.
the darkest period of my life because I was out there and I was thinking, who on earth is going to pay me to do stuff? Because these had all come from people who knew me and knew what I could do, but because of the nature of the time I'd spent in banking, I was what in old money they used to call a general manager. I wasn't an expert in real estate finance or trade finance or fixed income trading or anything. I'd done a little bit of everything over the 25 years, but I was like not a jack of all trades, master of none, but I was viewed as a general manager because that was the way the banks were kind of organized most of the time. So I was overseeing people who did these different activities.
Were you at that point?
Yeah.
Let's without causing too much relived pain here. Sort of you're there. You're in the kind of depths of despair. Obviously,
Yeah.
emotion. You're thinking, who's going to have me, basically.
Yeah.
But how long did that? How long were you in a sort of funk about that before it became more of a rational thought? Well, what do I do about this? Were you sort of going round and round in circles before you sort of thought, well, actually, I've got to do something about this. I'm just interested because a lot of people in business sort of have moments of setbacks and so on, and
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's not the setback, it's how you actually recover.
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of soul searching we're in the last quarter of 2001. I did a lot of soul searching in the last quarter of 2001. And it kind of dawned on me eventually that, well, two things. One, it dawned on me that I could somehow try to exploit the experience I'd gained over a couple of years as not so much a non-exec director, but like I had director status in these companies we were invested in, and I had what they called observer status, but I attended the board meetings. Yeah, and I was allowed to contribute. I didn't just have to observe. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do because all these technology companies were kind of springing up over the kind of the millennium period. And quite often these people were at the leading edge of technology, but they couldn't count and they couldn't sell. So there were opportunities with them, and it normally started. The door opener was normally helping them raise finance, and to be able to pitch for money to banks, to business angels, and so on. So I was beginning to create a model to allow me to do that in 2002, and then out of the blue, and it was when LinkedIn was first created. Really, I'd been encouraged to join LinkedIn, and which I did, and to get involved in local networks, which I was doing. And this guy from Yorkshire contacted me saying, we have a lot in common. He was ex-Barclays, and he, with another guy, had set up this company in Yorkshire. We should have a chat at some point. And they had a product which was basically a kind of a software tool where they'd spend one day with the board of a small business that was maybe ambitious and frustrated. And it was really, the day in simple terms was basically, where are you? Where do you want to go? How are you going to get there? And you facilitated it and then wrote it up on this software and gave it them as a report. So I went up to and talk about kind of fate or whatever. So this comes out of the blue. I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And I said, where are you based? And he said, well, our office is in Harrogate, and he said, but I live in Richmond. So I said, well, look, this is really weird because my son's at university in York, so he's only just down the road. So on my next visit up to see James, I met these guys. We hit it off straight away. And effectively, I bought the license to use their brand, their marketing material, and their delivery material for London and the Southeast.
Okay. And so was there was a big gulp of air taken, or did you just follow your instinct? Was it sort of like, I don't care, this feels right, I'm going to do it, or did you procrastinate about it? Did it take a while?
No, I decided this. It made perfect sense with what I had in my mind's eye about where I could make a difference.
Right.
Because it was effectively working like. In fact, I became an NED of two of these companies. But it fitted this idea of me giving back something to these startups from what I'd learned working with the startups in the States.
Okay, so did you, when you started
Yeah.
then giving advice and you had this license and
Yeah.
did you go through a period at the start of that where you thought, well, actually, I've got experience in one particular type of experience, but now I'm meeting people with lots of different experiences. I mean, a lot of people, when they start mentoring or coaching in this area, they sometimes think, well, what have I got to give? What have I got to give? I mean, was the wisdom just sort of dripping out of you, or did you kind of feel I'm learning as well as giving? I'm just interested in the mentality you had
Uh,
towards that in
oh, sure.
your
Yeah, I
own
was
journey.
learning. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was learning because the British small business culture is different to the American small business culture. So I was learning about that. And I was starting to come across companies which were not tech companies. And so I was learning things about different kind of industry, sectors. I mean, I had one that was an environmental consultancy, one that was a compliance consultancy, one that did kind of warehousing and storage on a big scale, one that was a designer and printer. So I was getting involved with a whole range of different, sort of industry sectors. But the underlying principle of doing this, where are you, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, was the constant, if you like.
right. And did you? I mean, was it as you expected? I mean, did you get energy, your own energy from helping folk? I mean, did that kind of, yeah, everyone talks about if you find something you love doing, you never work another day in your life.
Yeah.
It's old sayings like that. I mean, was that how it was immediately? I mean, for you, did you just think, yeah,
Well,
this is it, this is what I'm going to do? So,
it kind of grew over time, I guess. And, the word of mouth going around was positive, which was helping. So I started getting referrals rather than just having to go to networking events and do my elevator pitch and what have you. And the big learning, I would say, which is something where you never stop learning, which is how do you pick a wrong one? In terms of this is going to be a time waster, a bad debt, a really high maintenance, flaky kind of individual who's going to drive me nuts and so on. And so it was building that. From what I was learning from them was gathering experiences which helped me increase my powers of discernment to make sure that I was working with people that I wanted to work with, where it was going to be interesting work, it was going to be fun, and I liked them.
so this presumably means, from what you've been saying, that there were a few wrong uns along the way then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and sometimes and I got much better at picking them. And it could be. I said it wasn't just are they actually going to pay me? It went beyond that into the time waster thing. And also just not taking any of the advice you were giving them, and then wondering why things weren't getting any better. And
Okay.
another thing was saying if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got.
So on the sort of the Mellor meter of
Yeah.
picking a wrong and things like that, were there certain things then, certain traits or early things that sent the alarm bells ringing over time? I mean, were there
Oh yeah, I
sort of,
mean
yeah,
the some of the things I used to ask in what I call the discovery phase. When we're meeting up for a coffee and a chat or however we're doing it. One of the things I used to slip into the conversation at some point was, and I presume you've got a budget for this. This work they were going to ask me to do, and if they looked at me blankly or no, then I thought, well, how are you intending to pay me then?
yeah,
So that was quite a good filter. Yeah. And then another one was where there was maybe more than one board member, and there's like the business was headed up by a business partnership of some sort, where it's clear that they weren't all in agreement, about where, not just where the business was, but where they wanted to take it. And I thought, I really don't want to get involved as referee of this.
yeah.
So you began to learn that, and then not being able to articulate to me what it was they actually did. I thought, if you can't articulate it to me, how on earth are you going to build a business by articulating it to prospects?
Yeah, or themselves, sort of
Yeah,
on a daily basis.
yeah. So I think they were the main things, and the other one was where they were not respectful. And I'm not kind of getting on a high horse here, but they turn up late for meetings. They'd break off and make phone calls. They'd suddenly say they had to dash off. If they promised to bring something with them that we were going to work on, that they either didn't bring it or they'd forgotten to do it. And there was no respect at all. And some of them, even from the exploratory meeting, weren't really likable. I'm thinking, do I want to spend hours of my life with you? And I got much better at reading the signals.
Did you have this thing at the beginning, though? A lot of people talk about this when they start businesses, that they might be working with somebody who they kind of had their suspicions about, but they at the time, the money motivation, in terms of I'll take anything is often the thing that people say early on. Was that something that you were sort of battling with, or were you actually very clear with yourself
Oh
that
no,
actually
I battled with it in complete honesty, yeah. And I over the years I got smarter,
right?
but
Okay,
also I was also more relaxed because it was easier to walk away from things because you had other fish to fry, that you could do. And yeah, no, it is an issue. And I said at the start, I wasn't very good at picking the wrong ones, because it's something I never had to do before.
no, I can really relate to those. I mean, I feel fortunate in that
Yeah,
most of the people I've worked with have been Writons, and have
yeah,
been sort of have been okay. Let's focus on the good people,
yeah.
who you sort of helped along on the
Yeah.
way.
They were the majority, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. And what was it that you kind of got? I mean, I know, of course, because like you, I'm a sort of mentor and a coach, and
Yeah,
I and
yeah,
and I know what I get out of helping people. But I'm just
yeah.
interested in what was it that you felt, sort of in actually sort of finding somebody who maybe was a bit not quite sure where they were going or how to do it. I mean, what was it that was kind of giving you the buzz?
I think it was being able to envision the day when they were going to have the kind of expression of a little kid on Christmas Day when they suddenly realized that they'd done it, whatever it was. And I think that was the driver. It was, being in the presence of a happy client.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. It's kind of being in that moment,
Yeah,
when they suddenly. I mean, you can see it. Like if you're, a lot more into if things are done over sort of Zoom and Teams and so on. But when
yeah,
you see, but even if you're coaching someone remotely and you just see
yeah,
that moment, you can almost see the penny drop, can't you?
yeah,
And on certain things. What I mean, in terms of when you are talking to people or listening to people and then sort
yeah,
of helping them along, are there any areas, in the entrepreneurial thing where you are advising and speaking from, obviously you can speak from personal experience, or you might be thinking, if I'm completely honest, I sometimes think this where I'm advising and I know what they are supposed to be doing, but it might be an area where I myself am not the best at, and
yeah.
and so on. Are there any areas where in terms of entrepreneurial advice you give where you actually think, well, actually I could be better than that, maybe I should learn something as I'm talking?
I guess the way it kind of came out, if I've understood your question correctly, was
It was a
if
very
we
long
started.
question, sorry.
No, no, no. If we started, and if the client and I, or the clients and I, started entering into territory which was not my natural habitat, what I did over time was build a small, tight knit group of associates for whom it was. So
Yeah,
if I just give you one example, there were three guys coming out of a city institution who were going to set up their own sort of like wealth management business. And one of the people I know very well, and he's kind of in my inner circle, is a lawyer. And he came out of the legal profession and set up as a sole practitioner lawyer. And he'd worked both as a company lawyer and a partner in a law firm, so he'd done both. But he decided he wanted to be his own boss, so he set up his own legal firm. And I mentored him when he started it, so we became close friends over years and kind of very trusted associates. He had created this work aid, which was for these three to agree the commercial terms and the way they were going to operate before they went anywhere near asking a lawyer to draft a shareholders agreement for them.
mm-hmm.
And so I would provide them with his work aid, and then if need be, they could spend some time with him, because that way I knew we'd get it right. But by then I'd won their confidence to the extent that they would accept that. And that was a much better outcome for them than me trying to do it myself. I could do it, but he could do it really well.
I think there's a confidence thing there, isn't there, in knowing what you don't know, and being able to say, look, you could talk to me about this, but it's kind of bloke down the pub advice on this particular aspect of what we're talking about here, about having that confidence in being able to say what it is you don't know. I mean, one thing I'm fascinated with you, David, is that and this is from a content perspective, is that my area is that area, and I'm just in admiration of not only the fact of what you've done, but also the fact that you've written a series of books which have been, it's almost like acting as a blueprint for the entrepreneurial process. I mean, for the benefit of the listeners, could you just sort of take me through how those came about and what you were trying to achieve with those books?
Okay. Right. Well, bear in mind that what I've been telling you, we're still in the early years of the millennium. So like from 2002 to about 2007, let's say, because things changed after that. We haven't got to that bit yet. But basically, the books, the first one, of which is called From Crew to Captain, is about making the transition from working for a big institution to working for yourself, because it's not easy. I used to do, as you probably know, a series of workshops, for HR consultancies and outplacement agencies around that transition. And there was one particular month when there were two people. It was in the height of the financial crisis, and these people were coming through the outplacement agencies in droves, thousands of them. So I was doing this workshop, say 5 times a month, and there were these two people who did not know each other, who spoke to me at the end individually and said, wow, they said, if you could harness your what you know and your sense of humor and your energy, you could write one hell of a book. And I thought, yeah. And then same month, the guy that used to be my boss at Deutsche Bank, who again became a very good friend and still is, he said, you don't want to be on your deathbed regretting you never wrote the book you've got in you. And then the third one was another of my contacts was taking me to lunch, and he said, I've invited this other guy along. He said, I can't think why, but I just think you should be in each other's network. And on that day, this guy was launching his first book, which was about program management. And so I thought, I've had 3 warnings from 3 different unrelated parties in the same month, so maybe I ought to do it. So that was what drove me to write the first one. And so that's been going now for 14 years. No, it was published in 2010, so it's been going about 12 years.
I wonder if there's a sort of a law of sort of cluster law of people saying the same thing. I get this a lot in my world where suddenly 2 or 3 people are saying the same thing, and you're thinking, actually, this has gone beyond just a flash in the pan, a coincidence. So I don't know. And I'm a big believer in that when 2 or 3 people are saying that, you really ought to be starting to listen, to what they're saying.
So I did, and that was the first book. And then one of the things that had happened around that time was I was invited to start doing work at what was called Cast Business School in the city, which is like the daughter of City University. And it recently had to change its name to Bayes, Bayes, but it was Cast for quite a long time. And I was working both on executive education, doing stuff with executives around entrepreneurship and corporate entrepreneurship, which is really how do you create a spirit or a culture of entrepreneurship in an established business that's been around 200 years. Not easy, as I know, from Deutsche Bank. And I also did work with the MBA students, particularly the executive MBA students who tend to be a bit older. And I used to, if they were doing something entrepreneurial, I used to supervise their dissertations, or in modern parlance, they're called business mastery projects. So there you are. And I had this guy, and he was doing one which wasn't really entrepreneurial, but it was a big interest for him, and it's a fascinating topic. And his dissertation subject was: is video content on the internet purely for entertainment purposes, or can it have an underlying business purpose? Which was a great topic to choose. And about a month before he had to hand in his dissertation, he was badly let down by a FTSE 100 company who got involved because they were going to be his guinea pig, because he was going to use their kind of internet material as part of a survey. And the survey, to be statistically meaningful, had to be 1,000 people. And so he's absolutely distraught because his bottom's fallen out of his world. I said, well, look, I've just had 4 little clips put on YouTube where there's a link from my website from clients of mine. Am I too small? Is that any good? And he grabbed me like a drowning man grabbing a piece of timber. He said, oh, that'd be great. So he sent this, he did his survey, and it was all about, getting them to look at my website. What did they think of it? What did they think of the video clips? What did they learn from them? What did they think I did? What did they think made me different? And so on. So I was getting all this amazing market intelligence and being paid for it because I was being paid to supervise his dissertation. I thought, how good is this?
Yeah.
The big thing that came out of it is that out of over 1,000 people, over 700 said, ooh, looks like he's a consultant's consultant.
Right.
And that really stopped me in my tracks. And I had a look at how my portfolio of clients had kind of evolved, and they were bang on. I had, most of my referrals were coming from people who'd set up consultancies who told other people. And so the second book was a version of the first book, but specifically for a niche market, which is people setting up consultancies, and that's called A Privateer's Tale. Okay. And then the third one in the trilogy, it's called the Crew to Captain trilogy. The third one is called Commander of the Fleet, and that covers both the generic stuff and the consultancy stuff about, okay, you proved to yourself in the market the model works. How do you take it to the next level? How do you scale it? So that was what I became famous for in terms of being an author, was that trilogy. I've written a couple of others since then, one about easing into semi-retirement and one about going to full retirement, whatever that looks like nowadays. And so, yeah.
And that's, and I could recommend these books to anybody. I think they're good, and what I love about them in particular is the sort of listy nature of them, that you've kind of got a sort of series of checklists, to-do lists, and so on, which are excellent. So there you were, sort of mid-2000s. Tell me what happened next.
Well, what happened was unconsciously what I was actually creating. And I was so busy creating it and having a good time, was that I had moved from just doing this kind of mainstream sort of consultancy, mentoring, whatever you want to call it, to having a portfolio career. And I never even heard the phrase. I actually mentioned what I did in a workshop, and an American guy said, "Oh, jeepers, you've gone plural." And it sounded like a disease, but going plural for him in the States meant having more than one interest and having a portfolio career. And so what was evolving from about 2010 onwards was that I was still doing the advisory work in whatever capacity it was. I was increasingly doing work at the business school. In fact, they made me an honorary senior visiting fellow in the Faculty of Finance. Oh, my goodness me. And I was doing lecturing. I was getting involved in executive education workshops, in addition to the entrepreneurial stuff, I was doing sales, teamwork, leadership, building high performance teams, strategic planning, managing implementation risk, all sorts of things. And so I became part of the business school kind of hierarchy. And then I was kind of publishing these books, which obviously take a bit of time in terms of research and writing. So I used to say to people, in tweet length, it's mentor, lecturer, and author, and all three were kind of linked in different ways. They all fed off each other.
Yeah,
because a lot of the book content and the experiences came from the mentoring work. The books were useful, were becoming increasingly useful as a takeaway when I was running training sessions, and the mentoring that I'd been doing was useful because I started being made on some of these programs, and most of the programs were for aspirational, the leaders of tomorrow, basically, across a whole range of industries. And we used to get a lot of overseas institutions coming to London as well, particularly from the Middle East, South Africa, Southeast Asia, China, and Korea. And so this portfolio just kind of rumbled through from kind of 2010 until, when I retired at the end of last year. So that was 12 years of it. And the big challenge there was sort of time management in terms of balancing the time you allocated to each of these, areas.
You are now sort of at the process, having written the blueprint of sort of, the 2 books of changing tack and moving towards retirement. Are you living to your plan? Are you able to sort of let go and step back, or are you still getting lots of sort of itches and urges to get more involved in things?
No, it's working out as well as I could have hoped, actually. I mean, there's two of my long-standing clients, one I've worked with for 10 years, one for over 20, who are both at a stage involving potential, sale of their businesses, where it would be wrong if I walked away from them now. I couldn't do it with a clear conscience. So I've got those two. I've got the side hustle, which is obviously the ongoing book sales. I teamed up with Prism, the company, to do the brain mapping product.
Yeah.
Who powered my classroom workshop on adaptive sales techniques, which helps you turn strangers into cash in the bank and convert more prospects and get more business from existing clients. It's a half-day workshop, and they have taken it online. In fact, I posted a little story on it on LinkedIn yesterday, and so I've got those, and that's fine as far as I'm concerned. I'm trying to play more golf, weather permitting, and I've just come back from a week in Portugal, seeing more of my grandchildren, and having more little mini breaks and excursions with my wife. So yeah, it's all good.
Now, normally at this point, one of my final questions is, how would you like people to get in touch with you? There's a slightly different question for you: is do you want people to get in touch with you at all, or would you rather they didn't?
Well, I would say that if anything we've discussed has sparked an interest in the books, the best thing is to take a look at my website, which is davidmellerpublishing.co.uk, where it tells you a bit more about how they all hang together and so on. And there is actually, ironically, for the Crew to Captain trilogy, for each of them, there is a podcast talking about what the reader can learn from it and why I wrote it and stuff. And then if anyone is struggling with the sales side of their business, then they may be interested in this online workshop. It's only a half day, and there is a 4-minute taster kind of video, which again they can get to via the same website.
Crikey, there's so much in there. I mean, for me personally, it's David's realization that he was a relationship guy rather than a deal maker. He talked about his darkest time in which his business fortunes turned very sharply pear-shaped following the Twin Towers attack, and all this little gems that he keeps coming up with, like how do you pick a wrong 'un, and lots of others. I mean, David has a great way of highlighting the issues that we all want to know about and a unique way of putting them across. So thank you to David. And thank you too for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merribourne Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.